Today's objective is today I will learn how to revise and edit my work using a strategy called to and or not to and. Yesterday we started our drafts and some of you might have just only began, some of you might be halfway through, and some of you might be completely done with your review. It doesn't matter where you are in your review, whether you're at the beginning, the middle, or the end, you're still ready for stages 4 and 5, which go together. Stage 4 is where you revise. This means that you make changes to improve your writing. Stage 5 is where you edit your work, so you proofread and you correct your mistakes. So I'm going to be teaching you a strategy today called to and or not to and it's going to help you revise and edit your reviews. After our very first captured shadow puppet performances on Thursday, I decided to start my first review. So I have my web that you saw me create for Sean's puppet show. So I decided to use my web to help me fill up my graphic organizer, and then using my graphic organizer, I was able to write my first subtopic paragraph. So let's take a look at that first subtopic paragraph, which was all about how creative Sean's puppet show was, and let's keep our strategy to and or not to and in our mind, and I'm going to walk you through exactly how to use that strategy today. All right, so my first subtopic, number 1, is all about how Sean's play was very creative. So here's my paragraph. I strongly recommend watching Sean's shadow puppet play because it was super creative. One way Sean made his show very creative was by using unexpected puppets and props. And for example, for one of his characters, he used a Wonder Woman action figure instead of drawing a woman on paper. And he also thought to use a slinky as his wormhole. And these were ideas that I never would have thought of myself, but really enjoyed seeing in his shadow puppet play. Uh-oh. As I was reading my first subtopic paragraph for Sean's play review, I noticed that my review was attacked by the and monster. So I need to use our strategy to and or not to and to help me do some revisions and editing for my work. Let's see just how to do that. Before I model exactly how to and or not to and, let's go over these 5 simple steps. So step 1 is to reread your paragraph. Step 2 is to circle the word and whenever you see it. Step 3 is to ask yourself, which of these ideas need to stay connected? Step 4 is to decide whether to cut or keep your ands. And step 5 is to edit your sentences. So if you decide to cut any of your ands, you might need to replace those ands with a period or a comma. If you replace it with a period, then that means you're going to need to capitalize the first letter of the next word because that's going to be the beginning of the next sentence. Let's go over exactly how to follow these steps together. Now, when I'm using this strategy to and or not to and, one of the steps is to decide whether to keep your ands or to cut your ands. Now, you might be wondering, Miss Garcia, how do I decide whether to cut my ands or to keep them? So I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. But essentially what you do is you think about all of the words that come before the word and all of the words that come after the word and. If the words that come before the word and can make sense on their own, meaning when they're not connected to the words that come after the and, then you can cut the and. However, if the words that come before the word and only make sense with the second part, the part that comes after the word and, then you cannot cut the word and. Let's go over a couple of examples. I have the word or the sentence, the dog ran and he jumped. Now, I also have the sentence, the dog ran and then jumped. Now, Let's try to and or not to and with the first one. The dog ran and he jumped. If I take away the word and, it will sound like this. The dog ran, period. He jumped, period. Both of those two parts make sense when they're on their own. It makes sense to say the dog ran, and it makes sense to say he jumped. Let's look at the second one. This one, remember, said the dog ran and then jumped. Let's take away the and see if both parts make sense. The dog ran. Yes, that does make sense. Then jumped. That doesn't make sense on its own, which means that the second part, the part that comes after the word and, only makes sense when it's connected to the beginning part. So this and actually couldn't be cut. It would need to stay in the sentence. But in the first sentence, when both parts made sense, even when we took away the word and, then that means that you could cut the word and. Let's go through my paragraph and try the strategy again. I'm going to go back and I'm going to reread my subtopic 1 paragraph about Sean's play being super creative. And I'm keeping in mind whether I'm going to cut out some of my ands or if I need to keep them in order for my two parts of my sentence to make sense. So as I'm doing that, instead of circling the word and, I'm actually going to use my highlighter. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm clicking up above. I'm going to highlight in yellow. So all of the ands that I find, I'm going to highlight using the color yellow. I strongly recommend watching Sean's shadow puppet play because it was super creative. One way Sean made his show very creative was by using unexpected puppets and props. And, for example, for one of his characters, he used a Wonder Woman action figure instead of drawing a woman on paper. And he also thought to use a slinky as his wormhole. And these were ideas that I never would have thought of myself, but really enjoyed seeing in his shadow puppet play. So looking at my screen right now, I can see that I used the word and 4 different times. So I need to ask myself, can I cut any of these ands, or do I need to keep all of them? So I'm going to show you how to decide, just like I did a couple of minutes ago. So I'm going to start by rereading the sentence. One way Sean made his show very creative was by using unexpected puppets in props. And, for example, for one of his characters, he used a Wonder Woman action figure instead of drawing a woman on paper. And he also thought to use a slinky as his wormhole. Whoa! Without even doing my little test, I can already tell that that sentence definitely needs to be separated with some periods because that was a really long sentence and it had 3 different ideas in just one sentence. So I'm definitely going to get rid or cut some of those ands. Now let's check the first one. One way Sean made his show very creative was by using unexpected puppets. So if I add a period here after the word puppets where my cursor is blinking, that would make sense. But let's see if the word, it's only one word that comes after the word and, if it makes sense by itself. Props. Uh-oh, I don't think so. So that tells me that I need to keep this and because I'm connecting this word props to this idea. And the idea that I'm trying to express is that Sean used really creative and unexpected puppets and props. So I need to add a period there. Okay, so I'm going to keep that and. Now, there's nothing before this and, so I need to see if what comes next after the and, this part that comes after the and, makes sense without this and here. So let me read it and see. For example, for one of his characters, he used a Wonder Woman action figure instead of drawing a woman on paper, and he also thought to use a slinky as his wormhole. Okay, so I think now I need to check here too. And then I'll decide for this and after I check for this and. So if I say the part that comes before the and, this, if it makes sense without this and, then I can cut this and. For example, for one of his characters, he used a Wonder Woman action figure instead of drawing a woman on paper. Okay, so that makes sense by itself, but now I need to check to see if the second part that comes after the and makes sense without that. And he also thought to use a slinky as his wormhole. Yeah, that totally makes sense. So I am going to get rid of this and. So I'm going to cross that out. I don't need it, but I do need to capitalize the F because it's now the beginning of my next sentence. So for example, for one of his characters, he used a Wonder Woman action figure instead of drawing a woman on paper. I am going to add a period. I'm going to cross out this and. But now, since I crossed out that and, this is the beginning of my sentence, so I need to capitalize my H so that it starts correctly. He also thought to use a slinky as his wormhole. And these were ideas that I never would have thought of myself, but really enjoyed seeing in his shadow puppet play. So this and is connected only to this idea. So I'm going to see if this idea, highlighted in blue, makes sense without this word and. These were ideas that I never would have thought of myself, but really enjoyed seeing in his shadow puppet play. That definitely makes sense when I take away the word and, so I'm going to cross it out, and then I need to highlight the T in the word these because now that is the beginning of my sentence. So I'm just going to reread one more time to make sure that I have a paragraph that makes sense. I strongly recommend watching Sean's shadow puppet play because it was super creative. Check out, by the way, my craft moves. I did bold letters for super because I want my reader to read it like super, and I underlined the word creative because I also want my reader to pay very close attention to that word. One way Sean made his show very creative was by using unexpected puppets and props. For example, for one of his characters, he used a Wonder Woman action figure instead of drawing a woman on paper. He also thought to use a slinky as his wormhole. Check out those craft moves too. These were ideas that I never would have thought of myself, but really enjoyed seeing in his shadow puppet play. Perfect. My subtopic number 1 paragraph sounds awesome, so I decided to cut 3 of my ands, and I only kept 1. Now I am good to go, and I'm going to do the same thing for my next 2 paragraphs. Now that I've modeled how to use this strategy to and or not to and, you are in a great position to go back and try this strategy on your own. So don't forget to follow these 5 simple steps. So go back to the writing that you have and reread 1 paragraph at a time. If you only have 1 paragraph, Great. Go ahead and work on revising and editing that one paragraph. If you have 3 paragraphs, do the same thing for all 3 of your paragraphs. If you have your entire review done, then definitely go ahead and use this strategy to revise and edit your entire review. So remember, step 1 is to reread your paragraph. As you read one paragraph at a time, circle the word "and" whenever you see it. If you'd like to use a highlighter like I did, you can also use a highlighter. Third, ask yourself, which of these ideas need to stay connected? Meaning, will the part that comes before the "and" make sense without the second part that comes after the "and"? If that is true, then you can cut the "and." If it connects the 2 parts together and they don't make sense one without the other, then you need to keep the "and." Fourth, decide to cut or keep. And then 5th, edit your sentences. So remember that sometimes when you take an "and" away, you might need to add in a period, or it could even be a comma. Then you might also need to capitalize the first letter in the next word so that you can have a proper start to a new sentence. Now today, you're going to follow these steps and you're going to post one example of how you revised and edited your work on Seesaw. So if you're in Mrs. Cadenasso's class, you're going to snap a photo and you're going to post an example of you using the strategy to "and" or not to "and" on Seesaw. If you're in my class, you're going to do the same thing, but on our Seesaw page. Good luck!